Champ Chris Canty joins us,
What up,
and
big man?
What up, bro?
we have about a minute by the time you sit down to when we come back from a commercial break. And we always learn something new about Chris Canty. Today's little nugget of news: he was voted most likely to succeed by his high school mates.
Well, that's news to you, Jenna. It's not news to everybody else.
That's a very good
I
point.
mean, if
Way to make
anybody
this
knows me, they know I was going to hit it big one way or another.
Well, you know,
Just in case this football thing didn't work out, we got other ways to make it happen.
That's why he didn't go to a football school.
Right.
Because so he could,
knew
so he
that
could
if
get
the
a good
football thing
academic
didn't
background
work
at
out.
the University of Virginia.
Throughout the show, we'll tell you what all of our senior superlatives were. Kenny, last time the Saints and Eagles played, it was a tale of two cities.
I had a job opportunity I had to get to. I had to break some rules to get
Most
there.
likely to have a meeting with the FBI.
Me.
By any means necessary.
Sorry, Jenna.
Last time the Eagles and Saints met, it was a tale of two cities. It was the best of times for New Orleans, and it was the worst of times for Philadelphia. Saints won 48-7, but that was then, with an Eagles team riddled with injuries and quarterbacked by Carson Wentz. This is now where the Eagles are playing their best team ball, quarterbacked by Nick Foles. Jason Peters said the Saints ran up the score on them in the first matchup, and, quote, it is definitely not going to be the same outcome this time around. Chris Canty, how much has changed since the Saints dominated the Eagles back in Week 11?
Well, a few things have changed, Jenna. First of all, I'm going to start with the secondary, okay? Remember, Jalen Mills
Eagles
and Ron...
secondary.
The Eagles secondary.
Yeah.
Jalen Mills and Ron Darby, they got injured around the halfway point of the season, and this is that Week 11 matchup when they played the Saints. The Saints put up 373 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. I think that's in large part because that secondary hadn't had a lot of experience playing with one another. We talk about how important continuity is for the offensive line, but I think the second group on a football team where it's probably the most important is that secondary. So Cravon LeBlanc, Avonte Maddox, Rasul Douglas, those guys have got several games under their belt. And so now I think they'll be in better position to be able to communicate, adjust to what the Saints are throwing at them from a personnel and formation standpoint, and get that part of it shored up so they don't allow the big plays in the passing game. Offensively, the Eagles are going to have Darren Sproles back, and that's huge. If you look at Darren Sproles in that Texans game, being a release valve for Nick Foles, being able to dump it off for a swing pass for a touchdown, Darren Sproles can do that for your offense. And when we're talking about an Eagles offense that struggles to have consistency in the running game, I think you use that short passing game as an extension of the running game. That's going to take some pressure off of Nick Foles, and that's going to allow them to sustain drives. If you look back at that matchup that they had in the regular season, the Eagles didn't get their first down until the Saints already had 17 points on the board. So I think that's going to be important in terms of being able to control the complexion of the game. So those two factors, I think they bode well for the Eagles moving forward.
Well, and you mentioned members of the secondary who had been injured or were not yet fully immersed in the playbook. One guy who was out there and was fully immersed and was ready for what was coming at him and so couldn't handle it was Malcolm Jenkins. And he is also the guy who I think took this game the most personally. He won a Super Bowl in New Orleans. He is one of the most respected guys in the league. He knows Sean Payton, and he was angry with what they were doing at the end of this football game. We know that because he flipped the double birds to the New Orleans sideline near the end of the game. And if bulletin board material matters, if motivation matters, if revenge in sports matters, well, then the Eagles are, as amped as any team's going to be for the chance to go play in a conference championship game, add a little something to that because they were humiliated. And it was after this game that basically everyone on television, I'll raise my hand first, ended their season for them. That we said, okay, this is when your Super Bowl defense ended. When you are below 500 at this point in the year, you just got humiliated on national television, and we see the gap between the best team in the conference and you. And it is as substantial a gap as you could possibly have. But it's a totally different team now. The pass rush is back. The offensive line is playing like it did last year, except now they do have Jason Peters. And the quarterback play right now is better than it was in that game when Carson Wentz had his worst game of his career. 0 touchdowns, 3 picks, 160 yards. So it is a very, you can take something from the matchup, but I think what the Eagles take from it is the awful taste in their mouth they got. And I don't know if there's many learning points for the Saints from it.
And, CC, if you're going to talk about teams changing, The Saints offense actually got worse over the course of the last couple of weeks. So between the Eagles getting better and shoring up that secondary a little bit and the Saints offense slowing down, I know their defense has played great, you have much more of a competitive matchup here.
Yeah, all you guys make some great points. Jenna, the most important point, the end of the season, how is this Saints offense different since that week number 11? They're totally different. Nick talking about as far as revenge, being a motivating factor in these games. It is a motivating factor. And one reason why I believe in this, and I want Chris Canty's opinion because I've seen him be involved in something like this. When you lose the first matchup, you have a competitive advantage going into the second matchup. Is because if you've been embarrassed or humiliated, when you look at the tape, you look at it totally different than they look at the tape. The Saints coaching staff and Sean Payton's going to have a challenge of, wow, if I change anything, because we annihilated them. If I change something, then the guys, if it doesn't work, then guys going to be like, wow, we should change. Why we change it when we had stuff that worked? Now, from the opposition standpoint, Doug Peterson is going to have no problem getting their attention. Jason Peters, the left tackle, he let us know. Malcolm Jenkins, he let us know. So they are going to have a little extra sauce going into this game. But to me, the equalizer is the Saints rested. The Saints are at home. The Saints do have Teddy Ginn back to that offense who will give them some type of spark. And they have the #1 quarterback for me in throwing the football. If it's going to be tight and I need one guy to throw the football, I want Drew Brees. As far as all the guys left in the tournament, I want Drew Brees throwing it. So you guys make good points. Chris, what do you think about that revenge and playing a team that second time? Because you've been involved in a situation like this.
Yeah, I've been involved in a situation like this. The 2011 Super Bowl Giants, I mean, we went on that run in the postseason, but you look at that NFC Championship game, we had a matchup with the San Francisco 49ers out in Candlestick Park earlier in the regular season, and so we knew what kind of game we had to play going back out there for a second time in that season. And in the end of that game, you saw that there was a pivotal 3rd and short. And San Francisco, that team under Jim Harbaugh, they had prided themselves on being a tough, rugged bunch. And we knew that it was going to be a physical ball game. And I think if you look at that 3rd down where we were able to get that stop, I think that was huge for us in terms of being able to build momentum and actually win that game. We saw something similar with the Dallas Cowboys, understanding the kind of game they had to play against the Seattle Seahawks because they took an ugly L in Seattle earlier in the regular season this year. And you saw they bounced back and they played a very physical game, both sides of the ball. I think that's something that bodes well for the Eagles in terms of being able to go in with a certain type of mentality, knowing what kind of game it's going to be, knowing what kind of environment it's going to be in the Superdome.
Who do you think is going to win?
I think the Saints are going to win. Drew Brees has not lost a playoff game down in the Superdome, but I think it's going to be closer than the experts think.
Especially more closer than the first time around, too. Chris, stick around. Coming up, can Andrew Luck take down the Chiefs at Arrowhead? That's next. This is First Things First.
It's only Wednesday, Jenna. We got to be saving our picks and predictions. What are you?
I didn't know if he was